Hi, everybody. Pen here with Yogacises. I'm really excited to have Austeja here today. I just learned how to pronounce her name, and she just told me it's really cool that she just told me that her name means the goddess of the bees. That's right.
That's right.
Yes, you said that's a pagan, an ancient pagan name.
Yes, that's correct. It's an old pagan name, Lithuanian pagan name, and it means the goddess of bees.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Thanks, Ben.
All right. So with her story, she's been teaching yoga for 15 years, and she works with people with anxiety, people with clinical depression. So that's really big topic now, because depression, anxiety is like huge with this. Nowadays, a lot of stress, a lot going on, and the chemicals. There's so many different causes, and it could be anything. That's why it's
Yes.
really important. That's something that can't wait for you to share with us how you're doing with that and how you get started with it, why you started yoga. So let's start up with that. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Pan. Thank you for having me. It's really nice to talk to you and to share a little bit of my story. Actually, I've been practicing yoga for 15 years and teaching over a decade. Internationally, sort of started in London, and then I worked a little bit in Thailand, and currently I'm based in Berlin. So, and my story really started with sort of psychological eating disorders. I had some back problems. I was heavily overweight myself because of my back issues. Obviously, naturally, wasn't exercising enough. I was in a lot of pain a lot of the time, suffering from chronic pain. And I think it was, well, no, I don't think, I know I was definitely an emotional eater. So I think it's sort of an addiction that now is people are finally talking about it, sort of as one of the types of addiction. So it's sort of addiction to food and emotional overeating. So I found yoga sort of, it's my back that kind of took me on the path of practicing yoga, because that was the only exercise that released my muscles in the lower back and also gave me some sort of relief mentally and physically. However, in the long term, I started to notice that it helped me to live my life more mindfully. So to begin with food, for example, my habits started to change. And I have a sweet tooth. I love sweets. I don't like to deprive myself from things I love. And it was if somebody would, I've tried thousands of different diets, different doctors and therapists, and sort of techniques and methods, and nothing really ever worked. And I'm a tall girl. So obviously I do need my nutrients still. I can't sort of live on one leaf and one carrot a day. But it was through the practice of mindful eating and yoga, and I think the self-care and the love that the practice taught me and still continues to teach me on a daily basis, that I found the quality of my life started to change. My attitude and my relationship with food started to change. And of course, it's an ongoing work. I'm not enlightened yet, but yeah, that's something that I'm very passionate about, and especially for yoga for mental health. And this is something where sort of from teaching yoga classes in studios, I started to teach them in a more mindful way, in a way that appeals to the mind, because that's really what the Raja Yoga, or the Patanjali's yoga, as we know, was meant to be, really.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few things that I want to go deeper into. So you said mindful eating. So that's something that is, I feel like nowadays is hard to do for a lot of people. So
Yes.
what are so can you tell us more about mindful eating, and what are some of the things that you need to be aware of? Like what are the feelings, etc., that are needed for mindful eating?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's just begin with really sort of with the term mindfulness, like really what it is. It's a buzzword nowadays. But mindfulness is nothing else but the yoga practice itself. In other words, we're training the mind to be attentive in the moment as it is, and we do it intentionally. So mindful eating would be eating whilst eating, trying to sort of intentionally keep our focus on the present moment. So practically that would be switching off the media around us, switching off the TV, maybe not putting the phone a little bit away from us so we're not tempted to check our emails or respond some work messages. And then it is as simple as that, as sitting down, so looking at the food, checking how it looks like, being curious about the color, the shape, and then starting to eat slowly. I wouldn't say necessarily chewing it for a long time, which also can be very helpful, but I would say maybe being curious about what is the shape and the texture of the food we are eating at that moment. What do we feel? Possibly we feel saliva excreting itself at the back of the throat. Maybe we like the smell of it. Maybe it reminds us of something. So noticing these things whilst we eat helps us just remain more present. And the more present we are, the less we tend to notice that the less we eat because we are more satisfied.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point, because being aware of it makes a big difference, and noticing how you feel with the food, and
yes,
that way can help you to avoid it or keep eating the same food.
Absolutely. And so it's very important, I think, to notice that very often we have our routines, especially if you're practicing yoga, or even if you don't, you have a tendency to be like, okay, well, I'm hungry, or even if I'm not hungry, I'm used to eating it at this time. So, or this is where my colleagues maybe go to eat for lunch break. It's lunch break, so we all go to eat. I think it's important to know that if we are not feeling emotionally well, for example, we feel extremely stressed at that moment. Maybe we just had a row with our partner, or maybe our colleague told us, something unpleasant, or our employer. It is important to notice that feeling. And for example, if we are not hungry, and even if we are, to avoid eating at those times. Because even if we will eat it, then not only we won't feel psychological satisfaction out of it, which means we will definitely overeat or maybe undereat, but we will also, energetically wise, according to Ayurveda and yoga, the energy that we'll gain from that food won't be as nutritional as, let's say, the energy we'll gain from food that we consume when we are feeling at peace or calm.
Okay. Yes, that totally makes sense. So you mentioned Ayurveda. So my next question was going to ask what style of yoga you practice. So I guess it has to do with Ayurveda and...
Well, I practice, for me, it's actually just one yoga. I'm a great believer there's just one yoga, but there are many methods and many obviously schools of thoughts. I personally practice sort of the physical style of yoga would be in Krishnamacharya tradition. So it's a bit of Ashtanga vinyasa, which is what Krishnamacharya taught Patabi Joyce, one of his students, but it's also a lot of Ayanga alignment. And also Vini yoga, so it's sort of the yoga that is therapeutical. My belief is that unless we synchronize the breath and we aim to extend the breath whilst practicing asanas, the postures, we are not really doing yoga. We're simply doing gymnastics. And there's nothing wrong with gymnastics, but that's definitely not yoga.
Right.
So this is a type sort of, if I would have to define it, which I avoid, but if I'd have to define it, I would say that I practice in Krishnamacharya tradition and I teach in the same tradition. So, and that tradition obviously believes that there is more to human than the body. So eating as a yogi is important part, knowing your constitution, knowing the time of the seasons and time on the day and night also plays a big role. And there isn't such a thing as one rule for all in Ayurveda. Everybody's different. Maybe how I would eat would be completely different from what you, Pan, would eat. And also it would change month to month, or I would say maybe season to season, more likely.
Right. Okay. So what are you mentioned routines. What's your routine like? Daily routine, morning routine, or just like in general?
Okay. Good question. Well, on a good day, when I'm not traveling, when I'm not obviously overwhelmed with maybe some sort of last minute duties, the usual routine I have is that I first, when I wake up, I practice, and ideally I'd like to practice early in the mornings, but life happens. It doesn't always allow me to do my practice in the morning. But on a good day, I wake up early, usually before the sunrise or around the sunrise time, and I drink Ayurvedic drink, which is according to my constitution. I drink it with ginger, boiled ginger, lemon, and agave syrup. Or if it's the season of honey, like the summer was full of honey, then I have it with honey. When the honey is out of the season, I use other supplements for that. So that's the drink I have in the morning before my asana practice. Then I practice my asana postures. Depending, it can last between 20 minutes to hour and a half. And then I do my breathing techniques, and I do yoga nidra, which is yogic sleep, and I find that really useful. Sometimes I can't do that practice in the morning because I have to get out of the house quickly, like we all do these days. But then I leave this practice for the afternoon. But continue with the morning practice. So I finish my practice, then I do maybe 5 minutes of meditation, usually not that long in the mornings. And then I have a shower, and I have my breakfast, which is by that usually it's kind of late because I don't really eat breakfast that often. Usually it's more like sort of late breakfast brunch, which is about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. And that's my main meal of the day. So that includes vegetables, making sure I eat enough vegetables and pulses. I'm vegetarian, so I need to make sure the diet consists of enough nutrients. And then after that, get on with work, etc. And then in the afternoon, I try to do yoga. I snack because I mentioned earlier, I have a sweet tooth. So to avoid chocolate and stuff, I try to snack maybe a bit of nuts, not too many, and always a fruit. So one fruit or the other. And that's my only snack during the day. Then I do my practice, yoga nidra. I do the yogic sleep because that often helps me to refocus and gain my energy back, especially if I have to teach in the evenings. It can really drain you, or if I have to travel or have some meetings. So try to do some yogic sleep between 20 minutes to 40 minutes. And then about 5, 6 o'clock, latest by 7, I have my dinner. I cook my dinner. I cook all my food from scratch in the mornings and the afternoons. I like to know what goes on my plate. And my evening usually is quite light. I try to eat light in the evenings, just so I have a lighter stomach to wake up to in the morning hours to do my yoga practice. So again, it can be some vegetables, could be some rice maybe with some dal. Depends on the day.
That's awesome. I love it. The home cooking. I'm taking health coaching certification course, and the founder of this program actually mentioned vitamin H and vitamin L. Vitamin H is vitamin home cooking, and vitamin love. So that's a combination.
Wonderful. Yeah. What a great way of putting it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very important to, I think, to sort of like it's I know it's difficult because we like the times we live at the moment, they are very speedy times, and everyone has less and less time for things like home cooking. However, the way I look at it is that it's who, I wouldn't say that we are who we eat, but partly yes, who we think, what we eat. And I think we only eat a couple of times a day, so it's very important to know where the food comes from. And that's great if we can afford maybe a chef, but I actually enjoy cooking myself. I love the spices and different kitchens, different cuisines, all over the world, from Indian to Thai to Vietnamese to Italian to every kitchen can teach you something. So right. I really do enjoy that.
Yes.
The
And
hardest bit for me is always to resist snacking at night or in the evening.
trust me, I know. Yeah, it could be difficult. And
Yes.
especially you have a little one that wants everything, and she's like, and then you cannot give it to her, and you ended up eating it yourself.
Oh God, absolutely.
So and also the home cooking, I think for me, it's like it tastes better. It's because you're putting energy into it,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
you're being mindfully cooking, and you're eating the own food that you cook is rewarding.
Absolutely. I find them eat the cooking itself. I find it as a meditation actually, because you really have to be present. Otherwise, you will burn something.
Exactly.
So that helps me to be present. And in Ayurveda, for example, there's also great belief that the food tastes much better if you chant some mantras. So possibly in your head or out loud if no one is listening to you, or even if they are, you can chant your personal mantra that maybe was initiated to you by your guru, or universal mantras. And so those chants, they kind of also sort of, allow the food to absorb that's well, the energy that we know as a energy that's not visible for an eye. So yes, and I do believe, at least the comments I get, seems like the food is much tastier after mantras than without them.
Right. It's just like similar to different certain religions, they pray before they eat. It's the same
Yeah,
concept. Yeah.
absolutely. I think the whole world is way more similar than I would like to admit it. The cultures overlap and traditions, I would say the traditions are different, but the story behind them, when you begin to dig in deeper, it's really is alike, much more similar, than, as I said, than we would like to maybe accept or acknowledge.
Right. And it also works on the creativity part of it, not just like if you're more creative in cooking, you might be more creative in other areas. And especially with the yoga practice, it'll help increase the creativity.
That's right. That's correct. Yes, definitely.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, so like, oh yeah, now go back to, let's backtrack to the
Hmm.
depression and anxiety and how you work with people. What, like, so, for example, what are some of the yoga poses you recommend or sequence that you would teach for people like that? And besides teaching them yoga, like, do you work with them as a whole, like in terms of working on their nutrition as well
Hmm.
and other things besides just being teaching? I don't know how to describe it,
Hmm.
but
I understand. I got it. Well, since I'm not an Ayurvedic doctor, I believe that the contract you have with a student is is a contract of a yoga teacher. So naturally, I don't feel that it's appropriate to give consultations as a doctor, as an Ayurvedic doctor. It's not my place really to tell people how to eat. I can suggest them. I can potentially direct them to the Ayurvedic doctor who can do certain tests, and according to that, maybe create a diet to their particular constitution. Um, as a yoga teacher, as a yoga teacher who believes in yoga as a therapy, really, I understand that mind, body, and spirit are all connected. What I found from my experience, and so that's something I really battled most of my life. Really, I have my ups and downs, but I really think that I had depression ever since I came out of my mother's womb. And anxiety came into my life much later, only as an adult. And I found that these two can come together, but really they're also separate conditions, mental sort of illnesses themselves. And they require slightly different approaches. What may work for someone having an anxiety, for example, could be a bit more calming exercises. With depression, often I find that it's actually more invigorating, even physical postures that tend to help to build up the resilience or the trust, sort of self-confidence, which people tend to lack when they suffer from depression. So I personally suffer from clinical depression, and when I worked with my students, I found out that yogic sleep, as I mentioned, yoga nidra is a great tool. I strongly suggest that for everybody who suffers with anxiety. It's not always possible to practice the practice because you actually have to close your eyes, well, traditionally anyways. And often people who suffer from anxiety or depression, especially with depression, they don't always feel comfortable shutting their eyelids down, because that kind of draws you back inwardly into your thought stream, which is not really you, but is the thought stream that your brains learn to believe. And so it can be too overwhelming. So just to sum it up, if I had to say a few things, I would say for anxiety, I suggest practicing yoga nidra. And stress. For depression, I would say some vinyasa, sort of flowy, mindful flow can be very, very, very helpful, because the longer you are in depressive episode, the more lethargic you also become. That means your energy in your spine becomes dull, and so your mind becomes dull. So moving the spine, I would say focusing on movement of the spine. And then also having drishtis, different points of gaze in each posture, as we know it, is also really helpful. Because mind tends to run around when we're anxious, when we're stressed, and also when we're depressed. So is our vision. What I don't suggest people doing is people who suffer from anxiety in particular, I wouldn't suggest focusing on the breath too much. Because the breath is actually the first thing that begins to change as we suffer anxiety, or let's say even panic attacks. So if someone so it becomes shorter, more rapid. That's why we often get panic attacks, or we feel as if we're about to experience a panic attack. So for people who suffer from anxiety, I often guide them through certain mindfulness meditation or yoga nidra itself, where I ask them to listen to the sounds, experience the sense of touch. So sort of allowing their awareness to explore the external environment. And only then, after 5, maybe to 10 minutes, to bring the attention to the breath. And if they experience tightness or discomfort, again, you go back to listening to possibly external sounds coming from various directions. If what we witness in classes these days very often is that the first thing the yoga teacher tells to students as they come, let's say on the mat, let's say in a usual gym or yoga studio, is focus on the breath. That's often the first thing that the yoga teacher says. Now, someone suffering from anxiety is like saying, look at your illness, look at your condition right now, right here. And it can have an opposite effect than what the teacher desires. So I think that would be a very important point. Sequences really depend. When it comes to sequences, I personally work with private students, private clients, as well as corporate and international companies. If it's a company, I often deliver presentations where I introduce sort of ancient Patanjali's sutras, and I explain them, particular ones that are for the mind, although really all of them are, but the ones that really help to deal with the pattern of thinking and sort of breaking that pattern. And then we go through certain exercises. However, with students, my private students, when we work one-to-one, that's different. That's when I do create a personalized routine. And something, again, depending on someone's character, on their lifestyle, on their level of energy, and on their likes. Because you kind of have to like your practice, or at least not hate it. If you feel it's another chore, if it's another job for you to do, it won't be sustainable. And I'm a great believer in sustainable mindfulness.
That's awesome. Thank you for the detailed explanation of what you could do for people with anxiety or with depression. And it does make sense, like with the whole focusing on the breath or not. And I agree with you. Yoga Nidra is great. I've learned Yoga Nidra and it was really beneficial.
Great.
Yeah. So for when you work with them, at the beginning, of course, they're not going to have a routine of daily practice. And maybe they could only get the practice when, they're with you or something like that. But like in that case, what are some of the suggestions or recommendations or like tips just to get them started on doing a little bit at a time when trying to get through the day with anxiety and depression and end up trying to squeeze in the yoga in and be able to trust the process that's going to help them when they can't really see it yet?
Right. That's a good question. I think that's something we deal with ourselves. And I always say that we have to remember that yoga and meditation, or mindfulness for the matter, which is really just another word for yoga, is experiential practice. You can read as many books as you like. Unless you actually practice it and experience it on yourself, you will not feel the benefits. One of my suggestions is to choose one method. Don't get stuck to it, but do choose one method that works for you on the day. So let's say you have a couple of methods. Maybe one day it will be a bit of physical practice. Maybe next day it will be practice of yoga nidra. If possible, do stick around to one for a little longer, just because if you keep practicing different methods all the time and you shift from one to another, from one teacher to another, it's a little bit like, it's a little bit like looking for a treasure and hunting many small holes instead of actually digging one deep one. Another tip would be that's one thing that actually common trait for people who suffer with depression and anxiety, I know from my own experience, absolutely, is that self-criticism, thinking that it's not enough. I am not enough. Maybe blaming yourself that you're not practicing. So one tip would be maybe just to write on mirror in your bedroom or something, to saying, I am enough, or 5 minutes is enough. So as a reminder, also maybe putting somewhere notes saying, be careful of not to judge that you're judging. So that's very important, because we end up kind of often getting stuck in the cycle where we begin to judge ourselves, and then we judge ourselves that we're judging ourselves. And that's sort of something that can stop our progress on terms of healing and letting go of those patterns. But yeah, that would be, and self-practice is one of those things. Is I struggle with it. Sometimes my students ask me how you doing with it, and I say, believe me, I still have these tough days when I wake up and I'm like, and they ask me, does it get easy? And I'm like, nope, it doesn't. But you do gain more resilience, and that's something that you can only experience for yourself. No teacher can tell that to you, no student, no colleague. It's something that you just slowly begin to notice, that you still may be anxious, and you still maybe get your down, ups and downs, but you deal with it slightly differently. You're coping with it differently. Even the fact that you notice what's happening to you, and often in advance, that's already a massive, massive step on the path of healing, or at least living with these things, because often it's not something that you can just heal yourself, right? It's often people live with it through the rest of their lives.
Yes, the realization is really self-realization, knowing that something needs to change, and just taking that first step is important. You're definitely right about that.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Share with us one thing that you've learned from your teacher or friend or family, something that's really profound, that really made a difference, and you would like to share with us, with the listeners.
Oh, well, in terms of mindfulness or techniques, or just generally life?
Yeah, just in general.
Wow, that's a good one. I think the most profound, many, I've been very fortunate, actually. I had great teachers. I've studied with fantastic teachers, and I think many of them inspired me in many ways. One of them was A.G. Mohan and his wife Indra Mohan, Krishnamacharya students. I think they were they're in their 70s now, and they teach yoga for therapy. And they spoke a lot about how we are not the mind. If we would cut off, let's say, if I would cut half of your arm, would you be less of a human being? No, you wouldn't. So that understanding that we are not the mind, and noticing that the thoughts that come and go, that are impermanent, that they change, they cannot be us. That sort of gave me some relief, it gave me a lot of relief. Because we identify with the thoughts, right? The ego identifies with the thoughts, and that's a scary thing to let go, because if ego goes, what remains? But developing that inner witness, that watches all, just like we watch nature, or birds, or clouds, or trees in the park, without judging. And then if we notice we're judging, that's okay too. Understanding that that is the job of the mind. That the trick is not to tune out, but to tune in. And that desire to stop thinking, it will only be a waste of time. Because the job of the mind is to think. That's the nature of the mind. But what we can do is through the practices, through the daily yoga and meditation or mindfulness, is to develop a great awareness and the witness that simply watches all and is not really affected by these things. So I think that's very important. That's probably was one of the most profound learnings in my life through yoga, from my teachers. And another one would be you can love someone and not really, want them to around the table at the dinner time. So that's important, because I think people who have the depression or suffer from anxiety, they overthink, right? It's sort of rumination. And we feel often very guilty, maybe, that we push away the loved ones, or that we've done something wrong, or we feel that we need to fix things. So actually sometimes allowing yourself to, not to like someone, but know that you still love them, and that's okay.
I love that. It's beautiful. It's like, that is pretty powerful. You're right, Agala. Can you just repeat the names again?
A.G. Mohan and Indra Mohan. They're based in Chennai, and their wife and husband, and they teach now as a family. I believe they have a son and a daughter as well. They're based in India, actually, in Chennai. Very rarely do they come to Europe, but I had a chance to study with them once, and that was a really great experience.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thanks. So how do people reach you? Like, your social media links, websites?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm trying to be a modern yogi. I'm not really that good at it, but you can find me a yoga school, and it's called Hidden Buddha. So you can find me, and my website would be www.hiddenbuddha.net. You can also find me under the same name on Instagram. So www.instagram.com/hidden-buddha. And also Facebook, same, Hidden Buddha.
Awesome. Great. So if anybody has questions or anything, that they can reach out to you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Pan.
That's great. Thanks.
That's been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.